You're watching News at Prime. Let's get into another important conversation. Democratic Alliance leader John Steenhuisen says the upcoming national dialogue is another costly talk shop that South Africa simply does not need. He called for urgent reforms to counter policies such as BBBEE, employment equity, which the party claims have failed the people of South Africa. John Steenhuisen is my guest tonight, and he joins me in studio. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you for making time for us. I've just had a conversation about the very national dialogue that I started with in that introduction.
The national monologue, you mean?
President won't be happy with you. I don't know how you're going to deal with him in cabinet. Do you believe that it should genuinely go ahead, given the reservations expressed by the legacy foundations? And by the way, the committee, the preparatory committee, speaking today to say, yes, some groups may have left or withdrawn from the planning process, but that cannot be held back, or this process can't be held back. Should we give at least credence to those comments?
I don't think so. I think what's going to happen now is the national dialogue has a credibility problem. And it needs credibility to ensure that whatever was going to come out of it would have a hope of finding fertile ground for implementation. With these legacy foundations that have withdrawn from it now, it has a credibility problem. I think that instead of rushing into a process, it's going to be very costly. I think perhaps a step should be taken back. It's back to the drawing board. Let's see how we can bring people, including my party, back on board. Many of the concerns raised by the foundations are the very concerns we raised weeks ago when we withdrew from the process. And so I think that if we're going to have it, and I don't think we need another big talk shop, we know what our problems are, but if it has any chance of credibility, it requires those legacy organizations who've been at the heart of the conceptualization of the process and who now are also concerned it's a one-way street.
So what would it take for your party to go back and participate? And let's be clear that some people will say that your withdrawal may not necessarily have been of the same reasons the foundations are withdrawing.
Well, I think that if you look at the reasons, they are the same. That first of all, there's been a clear one-way set of traffic here. This is clearly an attempt by the ANC to regain electoral traction using the national dialogue to do so. And clearly now, the players in it are realizing that that's the case, that this is not a genuine bottom-up driven approach. It's very much a top-down, one-way street. And that's what's given it the credibility problem. Look, I think that what we need to have a discussion about is an implementation plan for South Africa. South Africans have had over 2 decades of talking. We've had the RDP, the NGP, the NDP. All of these things produce these wonderful documents with incredible solutions, but they are not implemented, and that is the problem. So any dialogue without an implementation plan is going to gather the same dust that all of these other plans have been doing. And we don't have the time to spend another 2 years kicking the can down the road. We know what our problems are. Crime, unemployment, an economy that's not growing, and deep inequality that still exists in South Africa in many, many spheres. We know what we need to do to deal with them. We have a medium-term development plan. Let's get out there and do it.
You lead us then, John, because you're already talking about the country's pressing problems. Today, you addressed a media briefing where 2 policies seemed to stand out: BBBEE and employment equity. Some people will say you are cherry picking because these are policies that do not sit well with your constituency. What about the country's industrial policy? Shouldn't that be of major concern? Because that is what is going to arrest mass unemployment. Am I wrong?
You're wrong. Well, you're partly right, but we can't have an industrialization in South Africa if we don't have a conducive environment to encourage industrialization. And that's precisely the point. And it's not about my constituency. It's about South Africans, the majority of whom are black, locked out of opportunity and languishing in poverty. After 20 years of implementation of these policies, black unemployment has grown, inequality has widened, and black household income has fallen. So clearly, there's been nothing broad-based or empowering about these policies. They've empowered an elite. And there are many South Africans sitting at home tonight, struggling to put a meal on the table, wondering whether they're going to get work tomorrow, a piecemeal work, or whether they will be in a job tomorrow, who are saying, well, what have these policies done for me? And the reality is that they have failed South Africans, which is why all these metrics are going in the wrong direction. Now, the worst thing you can do is when you're in the midst of implementing a failed policy that is having these devastating effects on our economy, is just keep doing it. Yeah. South Africa stands at a crossroads now. We have to make key decisions about our future. We can't sustain an unemployment rate where it's sitting at the moment. We can't sustain the inequality that is widening. We've got to do something about it now. And we've put on the table 6 key things that you can do immediately. Obviously, there's a whole range of things that you can be doing. We've identified 6 of the key things that we don't need to have long discussions about. We can get on and do it. And those 6 things alone will be able to shift the economic direction and trajectory of the country significantly.
And you've addressed those 6. I don't want to repeat that for people, particularly who would have watched your media briefing, but let me touch on the one that is developing right now. It actually has become a very hot, even political potato, hot potato, I would say. Operation Dudula is out and about, literally physically blocking people from accessing healthcare. And they are saying, you are undocumented if you can't show us your document, any proof that you are a South African, including allegations that even South Africans who may have forgotten their ID at home are being blocked from using healthcare services. Your fellow colleague in the Democratic Alliance holds a very important position in government, that's Home Affairs. How should the matter of undocumented migrants be dealt with, given that you are now in charge?
Okay, let's start with the first point to make, and that is that nobody should be taking the law into their own hands. People requiring medical attention should get the medical attention they deserve, no matter who they are. But there is a growing frustration in South Africa at the presence of large numbers of undocumented migrants in South Africa, and the pressure that it's putting on the South African system. Now, what we've had is over 20 to 30 years of systemic failure at our borders. Our borders are porous. There's no ability to be able to manage who's coming in and who's going out of the country. So it starts with effective borders, and the work that Dr. Leon Schreiber has done with the Border Management Authority and the progress that has been made there is good, but not enough yet. They need more budget. They need to finally have the transfer of the function away from the SAPS to the Border Management Authority so that they are able to have the manpower and resources to get out there and manage our borders. There is no country in the world that is successful that just allows anybody to come across the borders. Strong borders mean that you have an idea, exact knowledge of who is in your country, what they're here for, how long they're here for, and you're then able to manage them. At the moment, we have large numbers of people in South Africa. We don't know who they are, we don't know what they're doing, we don't know how long they've been here, and we don't know where they come from. And that is a problem. And that is leading to this frustration. And so you've seen Home Affairs starting now these programs where they're doing raids in key hotspot areas, asking people for the documentation and ensuring that we're able to then separate out genuine refugee applicants from just people who've decided to walk into South Africa and take advantage of our services, our infrastructure, and our economy. We must be able to process effectively and efficiently genuine refugee seekers and skilled immigrants and be able to stop at the borders people who have no skills and who are just taking a chance coming into South Africa.
Doctors Without Borders talking to us today, and they saying they have evidence, they have seen with their own eyes members of Operation Dudula colluding with security personnel at these health facilities, including the health workers themselves. What kind of conversation will you possibly have with your cabinet colleague in health?
Well, I think that it is completely unacceptable for anyone outside of our designated security services to be performing a policing function in the Republic of South Africa. And it cannot be right that people take the law into their own hands. It starts with that, and we've seen where it ends. We've had 2 major flare-ups in the country of xenophobia, and that is the end route of allowing individuals to take the law into their own hands and decide on their own bat who gets health services and who does not.
Yeah.
Those facilities must be managed properly by the security services at those facilities, and people who are then trying to do this filtering should not be allowed to be doing it at a health facility. The Hippocratic Oath is very clear about people who are able to access doctors, and I think that we should be ensuring that anyone who needs healthcare is able to access it. There could be emergencies, there could be people who are genuinely very sick and who need immediate attention. And you wouldn't want your relative or family member to be in a foreign country and be turned away from a medical facility when they need that help at that particular moment. And that is a separate matter to dealing with the large numbers of undocumented migrants in South Africa, which is recognized as a major problem. I don't think there's a single party in the South African spectrum who is happy with the fact that we have large numbers of undocumented migrants here, given the pressure it puts on the system. And we have to do something about it. Government is in the process of doing something about it, but it's going to require stronger security at our borders.
2 quick topics before we end the conversation. Tariffs and the GNU. But let me start with yet another political hot potato. Would you have a problem serving with someone who holds racist views in cabinet, serving alongside that?
I'm very disappointed in those statements. I don't think they have a place in South Africa, and I think leaders have a duty to hold themselves to a higher standard. We've had individuals in our party who have used racial epithets that were not appropriate. We've taken strong action against them. They are no longer public representatives. They're no longer members of our party. And I think that we need to be consistent in South Africa in the calling out of people who use that type of language, those types of epithets. They have no place in South Africa.
This was over 10 years ago. I'm sorry to interrupt you. This was over 10 years ago, he would argue, and that these were not just comments out of the top of his head. They were contextual. There was context.
Well, I would say that the same argument was used by one of my former members of parliament, who's no longer a member of parliament. Something that happened 9 years ago was resurfaced, and he was held accountable for it. These things have no place in our discourse. Leaders should not be using those words in any way, shape, or form. And I think that they have no place in South Africa.
Quickly, before I move on from Gaten McKenzie then, he happens to be a leader of a political party. I mean, who gets to hold him to account? Perhaps in this instance, we are talking about the president under whose pleasure he serves. What would your message be to President Ramaphosa?
Well, I think that you have to be consistent in your application of discipline within the cabinet. I had a member of my party removed from a deputy ministerial position because he didn't get permission to travel abroad. That is a relatively minor transgression considering some of these utterances that have been made. And I would just call for consistency across the board in dealing with these matters.
Name it, John. Say it.
Say what?
What is it? What is it?
Well,
what does consistency mean?
I wouldn't
in
want
practice?
somebody serving in my cabinet who uses that type of language. Put it that way. But it is the president's prerogative who serves in his cabinet, and he must make the call at the end of the day. It's not up to me to decide who and what positions that other parties in the GNU hold, what happens with them. The president must make the call in this particular instance.
The tariffs have arrived, and the agricultural space, particularly in the province of the Western Cape, that is among the sectors hugely affected. What is it that you're practically doing? I remember the visit to the United States. You've just reminded us of Andrew Whitfield. What is it that you're doing now to try and ameliorate the situation?
Minister Tau and I will be doing a joint press conference tomorrow. We'll be setting out very clearly what the pathway forward is in this particular matter and what the status of the negotiations are. I believe we've put on the table a credible, ambitious offer to the United States of America, which they will benefit from and which will keep the trade relationship going. It's now up to them to decide whether it meets the threshold. But it is very clear from discussions in recent weeks that there are extra tariff issues that have the United States exercised, things that are affecting our domestic environment and our geopolitical environment. It's also clear from the way in which Brazil has been dealt with and India have been dealt with that these things are not just tariff issues. There's clearly tariffs are being used now as a tool by the United States of America to make sure that their will is expressed. And we've seen that with the case in Brazil. We saw it with the 25% added on to India's tariff as a result of their dealings with Russia.
So allow me to interrupt you there. I'm sorry to cut in, John. That's a very interesting statement you make. In fact, it's an interesting observation because listening to global commentators who are saying these tariffs have nothing to do with economics in the United States. If anything, President Trump is using these as a political tool to whip those that he feels are not in line with what the United States would like to see. So what becomes the duty of political leaders like yourself who've done trips, by the way, to the United States?
Well, I think what my job as a Minister of State in South Africa and as a South African is to put South Africa's interests first. And I think that you can go so far with trade issues, but you also have to protect your own national sovereignty and your own domestic environment as South Africa. We've made concessions now in this third iteration, which we would not ordinarily have made, but we want to signal that we are open to do business. But my worry is that the tariff track that we've been talking on is not where the real problem lies. The problem lies in some of the geopolitical and domestic issues. And it is my concern that we will meet all the requirements on the tariffs, but that still won't be good enough to avoid a 30%. Because, as we've seen with the internal judicial processes in Brazil, the internal trade processes in India, and now some of the other issues that are filtering through here in South Africa, that this goes beyond just tariffs. And perhaps this is the new normal. Perhaps like after the Second World War, when the Bretton Woods institutions were established, there was a big global reset. Maybe after the Cold War, there was another reset. Maybe this is now going to be the new normal, where we're going to have to deal with the volatile and unpredictable White House and America when it comes to the trade perspective. And that's even more reason why we've got to work hard to try to keep market access open there, but at the same time make sure that we are diversifying into other markets so that we are not beholden to any one particular market, particularly when it comes to exposure on agricultural goods.
Yes or no? Do you believe President Trump has been unreasonable on South Africa?
I don't think he's been unreasonable. I think he's putting America's interests first. And in responding to that, we've got to be mindful that we also have a national sovereignty and we also have national interests that we need to protect going forward. And that intrusions into our national sovereignty should never be permitted using a stick of trade. There are things that need to change in South Africa. Government is committed to doing those things. But I don't believe that by punishing farmers and farm workers and factory workers is the way to go. And I think that South Africa is an important partner for the United States in Africa. And I also think we mustn't forget the US gets enormous value from South African agricultural products.
Yeah.
Great quality, great price, counter-seasonal to them. It's good for their economy to trade with us, and we mustn't forget that.
GNU.
Yes.
How secured are you in that environment, you think, right now?
Right now, I think the GNU is certainly, after the budget wobbles, is certainly going a lot better than it was prior to that. I think the fact that we've been able to pass a budget now and we've passed the appropriation bill, I think that has been a very good sign. It's stabilized things going forward. I noticed from the ANC's NEC that they're wanting to expand the GNU. I've made my position very clear. Let's focus on creating proper relationships first with the current GNU before we want to add other voices to it.
But the ANC says you've been unreasonable.
I don't think we've been unreasonable at all. I think that we've stood up for South Africans when it mattered. The 2% VAT increase, the fight against that, ensuring accountability from ministers of state who sit around the cabinet table are important things to do. They're tie in perfectly with the statement of intent. I don't think we've been unreasonable in any of our demands. I think we've been and shown willingness to be able to compromise. We could quite easily, on the day that the appropriation bill came to Parliament, have voted it down. We didn't. We said we are responsible coalition partners and we want to make things work. But working and compromise is a two-way street. Compromise cannot be that one party always has to bend the knee to the other. I think that it's about both parties coming together and finding compromises that are workable on all of these issues.
Let me ask you this question, John. The ANC, I spoke to them post that NEC. They are clear. The MK party is a no-go because of their views. But there could be a change of heart when it comes to the EFF. Would you still stay in the GNU with the presence of the EFF?
Well, I think that you're missing an important step. If you're wanting to add a party to the GNU, then you would have to go through the process set out in the statement of intent, which requires the consensus of all of the other parties. And then if that consensus is unable to be reached, you move to the sufficient consensus. We would certainly not reach a position of sufficient consensus if there was a plan to include the EFF. We've been very clear about that right from the very, very beginning. So what would have to happen then is they would have to then break the agreement and reconstitute the GNU and make offers to parties, and those parties that want to be part of it with the EFF in it can do it. We certainly won't be.
Interesting. And then finally, the Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Andrew Whitfield, is gone now. Is there an attempt or is there appetite from your end to bring someone else to replace him?
Yes, of course. We will be filling the position. We're very clear about that. What we're currently doing is a one-year review of the GNU across all the ministries and deputy ministries. And we are going to look at how we reconfigure, and we will be providing the presidency with a name within the next week and a bit.
I'm sure the viewers of this
Are you
channel would love to
offering
know.
to step in?
That's if I were a member of the DA.
We'll have to send you to America. We'll make you an honorary member. We'll send you to the US to solve all our problems.
So tell us who the member is.
You'll have to wait and see. You'll have to wait. But like I told you about Cabinet, you'll be the first to know.
John Steenhuisen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kwame.
Leader of the Democratic Alliance and the Minister of Agriculture in the GNU.